All right, lads, London lad lost in Asia, and you see the comic over there? It's about deep work. It's a little gag of deep work. Basically, it's me underneath the water, and someone asks me, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm doing deep work." And it's just a little joke, as in he's in the water, it's deep, so he's doing deep work. And this is about how I feel as though all artists should know about deep work, and they should practice this, because this is going to help you improve your art better, help with the quality and the speed of your art, and also help your ability to master new skills within art. Like, let's say if you want to get better at composition, or you want to get better at your inking, or you want to get better with color. If you're working deeply and focusing on a task with no distractions and no interruptions, there's a better chance of you being able to learn faster and progress faster, which is why this book is so important. Now, I haven't read all of this book, but I've read the first two parts before, and then I stopped reading it because I realized while reading this book, and the second, because there's three parts to the book, I believe, and the first part is about like what is deep work and why it's important. The second part is about how to do deep work, and I think the first section is dedicated to quitting social media. I haven't read the first section yet, but it got to the part where I finished the second part about how to do deep work, and it was talking about how to set up your life for deep work, and I realized I didn't really know how to implement habits properly. So I went back to another book called Atomic Habits to learn about that, and I came back to this book. But today I'm just going to share with you some observations and some cool things that I've learned from reading this book and how I think it can help artists. So Cal Newport, when he starts off this book, he talks about like Carl Jung and how he would spend a lot of time sort of in his own place in retreat. Even though he had a lot of clinical clients that he had to attend to, he spent a lot of time by himself. And I think this is like sort of the leaning point of where he starts to go on about deep work. He says that deep work is work that is done with, I'm just going to read it. Professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive abilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. So he goes on about how deep work is like concentrating really hard so you can create new value, whereas shallow work is work that is non-cognitively demanding, logistic style tasks often performed while distracted. These efforts tend to not create new value in the world and are easy to replicate. So he goes on about how this deep work thing is important because if you're able to do it, you make yourself stand out, because these tasks are harder to do, because a lot of people often end up doing shallow work, which means they're distracted. So imagine if you're doing your artwork, right? And you have Facebook open, you have TikTok open, you have your TV on. It's like you're doing your art, but half of your mind is on these other things, and it makes it so that the quality of your work isn't as good, and you might make mistakes. Like I did in one of my comics recently, I didn't realize, like coloring one of the characters the wrong color, and you're not even realizing you're doing that because you're distracted. He goes on to say that deep work is something that's becoming more rare because a lot of companies are realizing, just being on social media all the time is important. And I feel as though social media is great, but it can also be a distraction to you if you aren't focusing on what's actually going to push your career forward. Is like making sure you become the best that you can at your craft. And I think what's useful about this book is that the section 2, where he talks about how to do deep work, in that he talks about how you should implement a sort of rhythm to the way you do your work. So for me, that was using his rhythmic deep work method. And this is with the use of a calendar. So it's like kind of like the Jerry Seinfeld thing where you get a calendar in your room. I have 2 calendars at the moment. I have one back here, and the one back here is for every single time I complete a comic, right? So every single time I complete a comic, I just mark the calendar with an X. And at the moment, I'm doing 3 comics a week now. So there'll be like 3 X's for the comics that I've done during the week, and then the rest of the 4 blocks will remain empty, and then the 3 again. And that's how I know I've met my deadlines and done my deep work, because when I do my comics, I completely shut off everything. I like shut off everything. I grab my A3 big sketchbook and I do some thumbnails in there. And then after I've done my thumbnails, I go over to Procreate and I start drafting up the sort of thing you saw at the start, like rough sketch. And then I refine that sketch a little bit. And then after I've refined the sketch, I go in with the inks and then the colors. But I do this without any distraction besides the coloring part where I put on some music, because for me, coloring is the part where I'm like, ugh. It's kind of like, for me, like it was a thing of where I was scared of coloring. Like, I made a video about this and I didn't want to do it. So I gave myself, like, I was saying, if you color, right, you can listen to music while doing it. It's a way to motivate myself to color more. And as I do that, I feel as though I'll be able to just color and really get a lot out of it. But for right now, I'm just going to use music to motivate me. But I shut off everything when I'm working, and using this method of like crossing out on a calendar is really motivating. Another calendar I have on the other side is for every time I study. So what I do is I mark it with an X, a red cross, and then I write down the number of minutes I've studied for. And this is one of the key things he says. He says that if you want to know how well you're doing with your deep work, actually track the amount of time you're doing deep work for, and then you can actually see like how much you're doing. Do I need to do more deep work? Am I doing things infrequently? Because if deep work is what pushes forward your growth, you should really track it to see like how well you're doing it. And he also talks a lot about having these sort of routines to the way you do your work, because it's a good way of initiating yourself into sort of doing deep work. He talks about how like athletes sometimes, like if like, I think he gives the example of like a pitcher that might put their bat back in the same way or do the same warm up every single time. And this is kind of priming your brain and initiating it into doing your deep work. So for me, I will always do my deep work at this desk here, instead of like using, because I started doing my comics from Friday. I started doing my comics once a month. I started doing my comics once a week, right? And that was on a Saturday, right? And what I could have done is just gone anywhere in the city, like find a Starbucks, find a cafe, find this place to work, which is cool. But the problem with that sometimes is that you get so caught up in like trying to find a place, unless you've pre-written down the place you're going to work, that you can often get distracted. I found that so many times when I've tried to work, that if I don't actually write down the place that I want to work at, I might just spend like an hour walking around seeing where I can work instead of actually doing the work. So for me, I like to do my work. I like to literally schedule out my day before I start and do my work at my desk here. And if I'm doing it somewhere else, I have to write down in my plan, this is where I'm going to do my work. And this is part of building your routine for doing work too. You have to have like a place that's quiet where you won't be interrupted. So telling your family members and people around you, look, I need to work, allow me to concentrate. Because the thing is an interesting concept he talks about in this book is this thing called attention residue, where if you are interrupted, or you look at a text message, or someone talks to you, what they've said to you is still lingering on in your mind, and it kind of lingers on your mind for a bit, and it's this residue that's left there until you get back into your flow state and where you're working, and you kind of forget what they're talking about. Even worse, he even says, is that if you go to your phone and then you see a message and you don't read it, or if you go to your email and you see a message and you don't read it, that thought is still lingering on your head. If you kind of know the title of it or a bit of what they said, you're always thinking about, oh, what is it they actually said? when you should really be focusing on how you can push forward your work. So I think as an artist, like, this book is really, really great to read and understand how your brain works, understand like how you should set yourself up when you're creating your art. And he references that guy, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, whatever his name is, that guy with a really long name who talks about flow and getting into a flow state. He references that guy in this book. And I really like that concept of flow, where you're working so hard and you're concentrating so hard on a skill that you're just in this sort of zone, kind of like Kuroko no Basket when they get into the zone and you can do anything. I just love that. So this is a very brilliant book, and I really recommend that you read it as an artist to learn more. But anyway, this has been London Lad Lost in Asia. I hope you've enjoyed seeing my little comic, and I really don't know how to end this video.